Morning, guys. Welcome to the current affairs discussion, where we'll be discussing all of the important topics that are necessary for UPSC. And today is June, meaning that it is World Environmental Day. Right? And as it is the Environment Day, majority of the news is about environment. So let us look at what's about environment and how everything goes about environment and what are the things that we are looking at when it comes to environment. Okay. So many ads nowadays. Funding India's climate future, $1 trillion question. And this is talking about how there is funding gap in India's climate and environment protection. Right? It is saying that India has done anything. Right? It can do everything, meaning that it is doing everything, being laws or being initiatives. But is that all that is required? No, that is all is not required. What is mainly required? Funding. Right? According to this article, it is saying that India needs nearly 162.7 trillion rupees. Right? It needs 162.7 trillion rupees or 2.5 trillion dollars. Right? 2.5 trillion dollars in order to what meet the NDCs or to meet the nationally determined contributions. Saying that it needs 162, right? 162.7 trillion rupees or 2.5 trillion dollars to meet nationally determined contributions, and also it needs 10.1 trillion dollars, $1 trillion by 2070 for meeting the net zero emissions. That is too high of an amount, right? 162 trillion rupees or 2.5 trillion dollars and or 10.1 trillion dollars is not, it's not a small amount, right? Obviously it is not a small amount. And why does India need so much? Obviously everyone would ask, why would India need so much? The reason India needs so much is because India has many polluting sectors. And what are the polluting sectors? India has steel, India has coal, India has cement, right? What are these? These are all polluting sectors, and to make them green, it requires high amount of investment. The first thing that this particular editorial is talking about is that India has a financial gap, right? It has a financial gap, and that financial gap is mainly to address this particular industry: steel, cement, then you have power, then you have roads, you have transport. All these are what? They are very polluting, right? They are very toxic in nature when it comes to industries, as industries in nature, right? Then you have to make it you have to make them green. In order to make them green, you need a lot of funds, right? And so any normal question would be that why aren't the private companies investing? Right? That would be the normal question. You say that you need trillions and trillions of rupees. Obviously government cannot put all of the money, but obviously private companies can. But if you actually think, let's say there is two companies, company A and company B, right? Company A is looking for building a coal plant, right? A coal plant, and it is actually polluting, and the profits that are given, that are certain, they know that this is the amount of profit that the particular company will get. And there is company B which is looking for a hydrogen plant, right? Green hydrogen, right? It is not polluting in nature, and the profits are very less. You cannot say that the profit, you will get profits, right? Very uncertain profits, right? This, the thing is, here you have uncertain profits. Now if you actually see, which company would a bank choose, right? Which company would a bank choose? Obviously it would choose A. Why? Because the profits that are there are certain. Obviously a bank would choose any company that is giving consistent or what you call profits, right? Only if he sees that it is getting profit or it can be able to repay back, only then it will give that particular company a loan. Otherwise will it give loan? No. So that is another problem with this particular green finance when it comes to private companies, right? First thing is that banks only favor those companies which uh, actually what you call have certain profits. Now what are the developed countries doing? Another country that people might ask is that let's say the developing countries are struggling, but there are developed countries that can actually help. Yes, obviously, truly that developed countries can actually help. Well, what have the developed countries done? Developed countries have promised $100 billion, $100 billion annually under the Paris Agreement, and they also promised $300 billion under the Baku Agreement, Baku, by 2035. So obviously they are also promising, right? They're promising, but is it happening? It's not happening. The countries are not paying $100 billion. Then there is $300 billion, and there are initiatives like International Solar Alliance, many alliances. There is tropical, what you call finance. All of these finance measures are there, but at the end of the day, it is the actual getting of finance that is required. As long as the finance is not there, you do not have finance. Only you have words, right? So developed countries are saying all of these, but they're not doing anything. They're saying that we'll give you $100 billion, we'll give you $300 billion, we'll give you $100 trillion, we'll give you a lot, but they're not giving, and they are actually putting sanctions. If you actually see, there is carbon border adjustment mechanism, and you have USA's Section 301 deal, trade deal. What are they doing? They're saying that just because you're not following certain norms and certain rules, we are going to impose more tax. At the end of the day, it is the developing countries, it is the developed countries that have to help the developing countries. When the developed countries are not helping the developed countries, at least they should help them in a manner such that they can grow. But they're not helping them grow. They are putting more interest or more taxes, and they're reducing their growth rate. What will happen when all of this will happen? Obviously, the growth factor or the finance or funding factor will reduce, right? Only when all of these is happening, it is very hard for a country like India to grow. But whatever is happening, India has always been progressive, right? What has India done? India has brought in green bonds. India has brought sovereign green bonds. India has brought sustainability bonds. Right? It has brought all of these bonds which would actually help ensure that there is green financing. Right? We have green bonds which only fund green projects, sovereign green bonds which would help or enable the international investors invest in the green projects. Then there's sustainability, meaning that there is social sustainability and environmental sustainability that is being met through these bonds. Right? So obviously India is also doing a lot. While the developed countries are not focusing a lot, they're only saying things that will give you money, right? Will not do anything, right? But uh, what is RBI doing in all of this, right? We are looking at everything, right? Firstly, we looked at how private banks are looking at, right? And secondly, we saw how developed countries are doing, and third thing, we saw how what our government is doing. Now fourth, let us see how the RBI is doing. What is RBI doing? RBI is saying that we need to assess. It is assessing the climate risk. Only when it assesses the climate risk, then we'll understand what that particular finance is doing, right? It now requires, basically RBI now requires that every bank does the climate risk checks, right? It also wants environmental impacts or increase the green lending. These are all the things that RBI is actually checking for, right? It is asking the banks to check for the climate risk. It's also asking for them to lend in the green sector more. Only when all of these will happen, then the funding issue will be resolved. Otherwise, the funding issue will not be resolved, right? And the main thing that we need to focus on is the priority sector lending. We have priority sector, we have PSL, which is focusing on agriculture, then MSMEs, then women. In all of these sectors, it is focusing where bank has to give certain amount without fail. It has to give loans for these sectors without fail. But if we actually include green sectors, it will be more helpful, obviously, because if we give priority sector lending for women, obviously more women will come and take loans because we are giving them priority. Just like that, we also need to give priority sector lending in the green sectors, where if we say that, let's say 18% of the loans that are given are in the green sector, then what will happen? Many people who are actually setting up solar factories or solar panels or wind energy, all these energies, they'll come forward and take the loans and ensure that they set up all everything. Thereby it is reducing the burden of financing. Then we don't have to depend on other countries for financing. That is the other issue that we have, right? PSL priority sector lending is not there, right? Then the other thing is brown financing. You have to reduce the brown financing. What is brown financing? Brown financing is nothing but financing all the polluting sectors. As I told you that if there are two companies, company A and company B, where company A is looking forward for putting a coal factory, whereas company B is putting up for a non-polluting factory, which would a bank support? The bank would obviously support company A because it is giving certain profits. Similarly, brown financing, what is it? It's nothing but paying all the polluting sectors because they have certain profits. This is the reason we have to reduce the brown financing. Until and unless we reduce the brown financing, it is very hard, right? Now, the other thing that banks need to do is this climate stress testing, right? Climate stress testing. What is climate stress testing? Banks, obviously, what will they do? They will check whether you can pay or not pay, right? Obviously, after the 2008 economic crisis, all the banks have become very cautious and they are checking at the background whether they are a prime loaner or a prime lender or a prime borrower or a subprime borrower, right? They are checking all of these and seeing whether that person can pay or not. Just like that, banks should also do climate stress testing. Now, what is climate stress testing? Meaning that you're checking whether that person can pay or not. But are you checking whether that particular infrastructure that they are building is tolerant of droughts or floods or heat waves, right? And whether they can pay back when these kind of things happen, right? Only when you can check all of these, then the climate financing will be more stronger. Let's say a company has set up a green funding or green finance or something green, right? It has put up something green that is not polluting in nature, and flood has come. As the flood has come, the particular infrastructure is damaged. No, will the company be able to repay? No. So what is happening? There is high amount of debt and people will hesitate. All the banks will hesitate to give. So you should also look at the climate stress testing so that you can improve the bank's confidence. Only when the bank's confidence is improved, then all the companies will come and take loans. Otherwise, they'll not take loans, right? So the third thing is climate stress financing. The fourth thing that we need to keep in mind is that climate finance taxonomy, right? What we need to call green, right? Let's say a particular company is there. A company is there and it is saying that it is a green company, meaning that it is doing everything that it can to maintain that the environment is protected. Now, what is it doing then? It's saying that it only has planted one tree. It's saying that I planted only one tree, I'm green. But is that the original definition of green? We don't know because we do not have a definition of what green is. A company can declare itself as green based on a very minute thing that it has done. Right? It can just plant a tree. It can say that it has stopped a person from cutting down a tree and says that it is green. That is not how it works. That is not green. That is called greenwashing, meaning that you are doing everything you can and you are not contributing to the environment. Yet you are saying that you are contributing to the environment. That is called greenwashing. We do not have a particular terminology saying what is green and what is not green. Until unless we do not have these kind of things, it will not work. Right? So green financing or coming up with a climate finance taxonomy on what green is very important, right? Right. The third thing is, the next thing is blended finance. Blended finance. As I was telling you, obviously companies would be hesitant to invest whenever there is problem, right? What if the government saw that opportunity and took the opportunity and said that for the first loss, we'll take care of it. We'll take care of everything, right? Let's say a flood is coming, right? And if that flood has damaged nearly $100 million worth of infrastructure, we'll bear the loss of the $100 million of infrastructure. You don't worry. Then what will companies do? They'll get more confidence. They are saying that they'll think that, yes, we can invest here because the government is trying to back us. It's trying to say that we'll be there for you. It is giving us a promise. So there is concrete evidence that everything will be all right. So that is why blended finance is important, right? The main other thing is blended finance. Now, all of this is happening, but we see that the states are still struggling, right? Right? We discussed how there is contribution from the developed countries, there is governments, what do you call, efforts, then you have banks efforts, all of the companies efforts, all of this is happening. But what are the states doing? States cannot do anything, obviously, because states do not have access to loans. At the end of the day, who has access to international loans? It is the central government, not the state government. And whenever the state borrows anything for other than their finances, what is that? That is called off budget borrowing. They have to pay it from themselves. It's very hard for a state to maintain all of these when everything is happening like this, right? So a separate facility, right? A separate facility as state climate facility should be brought in. Only when all of this will happen, the issue will be targeted from the grassroots, right? It is not only the upper part that should be taken care of. It is the inner part should be taken care of as well. And if center is here, then states are here, then local bodies are here. So everyone should be empowered. Only when everyone is empowered, that is when the actual mechanism will work properly. Until and unless the mechanism is not chronological or what do you call in a proper manner, it will not work, right? So that is the other aspect that this particular editorial is talking about. Then lastly, it is talking about the solutions. Now, what are the solutions that are required? Firstly, creating a taxonomy, meaning which is green and which is not green. Second thing, create a state facility, right? Helping the states bring in a facility and what do you call ensuring that they can give loans and create an RBI framework for state facilities. Right? These are the things that the particular editorial is talking about. Right? You can use this particular editorial in GS3. Right? GS3 when it comes to environmental funding and environmental finance. Right? You can use it in these two aspects when it comes to GS3. Right? That is all about this particular editorial. Moving on, we have National Environmental Survey whose time came. Right? It's talking about National Environmental Survey. Basically, why has this idea come? The idea has come because we already have an economic survey. An economic survey is something that is given by the economic advisor, right? And as the economic advisor is actually bringing in the economic survey, what are they doing? They're ensuring that everything is calculated, everything is scientific in nature, everything is done properly, and we have actual data on how our economy is, right? We are doing a lot to bring in and to see what the health of our economy is. Similarly, we also have to bring in a special advisor, right? Special advisor where we collect data, where we do everything in a coordinated manner and ensure that we are understanding how or what the health of our environment is, right? That is why they are talking about environmental survey. Now, why do we need environmental survey? The reason we need environmental survey is because there are many things that are happening in India. Here you can see they have given multiple stats. You're saying what are these things that are there? 71% of heat waves, 71% of heat waves, 60% of agriculture and pest diseases, right? Agriculture and pest diseases. Then you have 59% of power outages, and 52% water shortage, and 52% air pollution, right? 53% water pollution. These are all the things that this particular editorial is given, and based on this editorial, you can say that India is actually going through a lot. Right? India is actually going through a lot. We have a lot of data. Many NGOs are collecting data. Many government, what do you call, arms are collecting data. But do we have a collective data where we can look at this particular aspect and say, yeah, this is what wrong with India, and we have to look at this aspect? No, because everyone is doing it using a different metric. As everyone is using a different metric, we cannot compare things. One is using kgs and one is using tons, right? And obviously you cannot calculate based on that and compare based on that. What will happen when you do that? Obviously all of the data that is being collected is being wasted. There is no coordination, there is no proper measurement, there is no proper chronology, there is no proper what do you call sequence. When all of these are happening, all the data is happens out, right? So what is the editorial saying? They're saying that we have a lot of data, but the data is not coordinated or sequenced or put in a chronology so that we can understand what the complete picture of India's environment is. Right? That is what they're saying. They're saying that we do not know what the environmental picture of India is. In order to do that, we need to come up with a survey. Just like how we have economic survey, we have to come up with an environmental survey. That is when we'll understand everything, what is happening and why everything is happening, right? And what is the problem with the current system is that we, as I told you just now, there is no lack of data. It is the lack of coordination, right? And what are the features of the environmental survey? It will be a statutory body, expert advice, and coordinated data. All of these are the aspects of the environmental survey. That is what this particular editorial is talking, nothing much, right? It's only talking about how we need an environmental survey, and that environmental survey will help us understand the uh, what you call spans of what our environment is like. And only when we have a complete understanding of what our environment is like, then we'll be able to tackle it. Otherwise, it will be very hard, right? So that is what this particular editorial is talking about. And yeah, it is saying that we need an environmental survey so that we can prevent environmental degradation, right? We can prevent environmental degradation, we can prevent, and then we have how we can achieve the climate goals, right? All the nationally determined contributions or the other goals that we are actually putting, right? First the environmental degradation, then the achievement of nationally determined contributions, and then you have balanced development. What is balanced development? Balanced development is nothing but where you're developing the cities or the areas and also taking care of sustainability, where you're not ensuring there is displacement of people, right? No displacement of people, there is rehabilitation, there is resettlement. All of these aspects are being taken care of. So that is what this particular editorial is talking about, right? It is saying that we need an economic survey, and until unless we have an economic survey, it is very hard for us to tackle everything and get an understanding of what our environment is like, right? And you can use this particular editorial again in GS3 only because it is talking about environment, and you can also use it in GS1, I guess, whenever we have what do you call geography. You can use it in geography or disaster management, right? You can use it in these kind of aspects, right? Disaster management is again GS3, right? You can use this in these places, right? Then you have when El Nino becomes an economic crisis, right? Just talking about how El Nino is not a what do you call environmental crisis, but it's also an economic crisis. Now, what is El Nino? El Nino is nothing but a climate phenomena where there is warm water, right? Warm water staying there nearly in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean, right? They are staying there in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean because the trade winds have weakened. As the trade winds in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean have weakened, there is no transfer of water from the eastern Pacific Ocean to the western Pacific Ocean. As there is no transfer of water from the eastern to western, there is no upwelling. So there is no pressure difference. As there is lack of pressure difference, there is high amount of what? Stagnation of water. As the stagnation of water is very high, there is no rainfall in the places like India or Australia, these kind of regions where there's no rainfall. But what is the effect of this El Nino is what we are talking about, right? It is saying that as the El Nino is not there, there will be weak monsoon. Weak monsoon is the main cause that will happen after El Nino. What will happen if there is a weak monsoon? There will be food inflation, right? There will be food inflation. Obviously, whenever there is weak monsoon, what is happening? All the agriculture that is actually depending on the monsoon is failing. As there is low amount of water and there is low amount of water recharge, right? All of these lead to food inflation. That is the first aspect, how there is an economic crisis. The second aspect is how what do you call there is agriculture shock. As I told you, there is food inflation as there is no food shortage, right? Food shortage is another aspect that is there. And the third aspect is there is high amount of heat stress. What is heat stress? Meaning that as the rainfall is very low, right? You know that there are high amount of urban areas. There is this thing called urban heat trap or urban domes, right? Heat domes. What are they? They're nothing but where the urban area is trapped of full heat. As it is trapped of full heat, and there is made of concrete and asphalt. What will they do? They'll trap more heat. As they're trapping more heat, the amount of heat is also increasing. And as there is no monsoon to reduce the amount of heat, what is happening? There is heat wave and heat stress. And who are the main people who are getting affected by the heat stress? It is the laborers, it is the vendors, it is the agriculture workers. All of these people are getting affected by the heat stress, right? There is firstly food inflation, where there is shortage of food and leading to an increase in food supply. And then there is agriculture shock, where is high amount of crop losses, and there is heat stress, which is affected by which affects the agriculture workers or the street vendors or the construction workers. All of these workers are being affected, right? And that is why it is called a developmental issue. Now, why is it called a developmental issue? The reason it is called a developmental issue, because let's say food crisis is there, right? Food inflation, food crisis leads to food inflation. Heat wave or heat stress leads to lack of worker productivity, and there is food shortage. Then there is economic crisis. So these are the things that are actually leading to what? El Nino being an economic crisis. That is what this particular editorial is talking about. It's saying that El Nino is not only a geographical or a physiological phenomena, right? I mean, Earth phenomena, but it is also an economic crisis that is actually stopping our development, right? How is it stopping our development? By decreasing the productivity, increasing our imports, right? All of these are the reasons why El Nino is actually very bad. And I think in this year, I think it's Super El Nino. They're calling it Super El Nino because it is going to last longer. It is going to last longer from 2026 to 2027 as well. So we have to. There is high amount of what you call speculation that the drought will continue for a longer period. And in these times, obviously, what we have to do, we have to reduce the water wastage. Water wastage we have to reduce. Then we have to what do you call reduce the water exports. Now, what is water export? Water export is nothing but where you're using a high amount of water to produce a particular product, and that product is being exported from India. Let's say we are producing steel, right? We are producing steel, and for producing 1 kg of steel, we are using 100 gallons of water, and we are exporting this 1 kg of steel. So we are indirectly exporting 100 gallons of water. So we have to reduce the water exports. We have to reduce the water wastage. We have to increase rejuvenation, water rejuvenation. We have to ensure that the wetlands are proper. We have to come up with mechanisms which would reduce the heat stress, so that all the people who are there, they are not suffering. Right? These are the things that you need to keep in mind when El Nino is actually troubling us. Right? That is what this particular editorial is talking about, and you can use this particular editorial in General Studies paper 1, where you are talking about geography, or GS3 when it comes to disaster management. Right? These are the things where you can use all these editorials. Right? So that is it for today's class. Hope you guys have learned a lot. Right? We'll meet you guys in the next class. Thank you.